Hello, fellow. Okay, I'll start. Okay. Hello, fellow Lolsters. Welcome to the next episode of LOL Love of Literature. And today we have with us Alka Joshi, a New York Times bestselling author and an author of the trilogy that I am currently reading. I am reading the Henna Artist.
Yay.
Yeah. So I request Ms. Jain to give a formal introduction to Ms. Joshi.
Yes, Alka Joshi is the international best-selling author of the Jaipur Trilogy, the Henna Artist, the Secret Keeper of Jaipur, and the Perfumist of Paris. Her debut novel, The Henna Artist, immediately became a New York bestseller and Reese Witherspoon Pick and was longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. It has been translated into 29 languages, amazing, and is currently in development at Netflix as a TV series. Brilliant. Alka was born in India and came to the US with her family at the age of 9. She has a BA from Stanford University and an MFA from California College of Arts. Welcome, Alka, to L
Thank
World.
you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very heartening to have you on your birthday. I wish you a happy birthday, many happy returns.
Thank
So
you.
let's jump into the first question. We believe in the first question for us to set the momentum. So over to Danya.
So, Akka, I understand that the Henna Artist is set in the Independence Times, it's basically historical fiction. But there is this beautiful art of writing historical fiction by not making the actual history the entire focus, right? So, can you take us through the process of how you did it, how you made history just the background and not the main focus?
I think I always wanted to write about women living in India at this particular period of time, which is when my mother was first married and started having children. And I wanted to explore what was life like for those women, whether they were from the sort of poor class, the middle class, or the wealthy class, and also how all of these different classes interacted with one another. What was the life like for these women? Because really what I was trying to explore is what was my mother's life like at this time in the 1950s and 60s? And I think what was important for me is to portray this in as realistic a fashion as I could. I think that so many portrayals of India are about the partition, or they are about poverty, or they are about the immigrant experience. And I wanted to do something totally different. I didn't want to handle any of those. I just wanted people to understand that Indians are like everybody else. They go to work, they want to take care of their kids, they make sure there's enough food on the table.
I know. Here is another author, debut author, who did exactly that. She touched on partition, but not telling about partition, but the normal life during partition. That's why we were fascinated when you explained these things. Right, Danya? I was really thinking, oh, you both have thought alike,
Yeah. So I'm so happy to find another historical fiction author who doesn't have, because my book also is like that. That's what Ms. Jayanti was mentioning. My book also is a historical fiction, which doesn't, it is also set during partition, but it is not about partition in itself. So, I would like to know, when did you decide for it to be a trilogy? Was this your first thought when you started writing itself? Did you know, okay, I'm going to have like more than a book? Maybe not a trilogy, but at least two works. Like four. What? How many ever? It's not fit to be just in one book. Did you think that when you started, or
Never. No, that was
Mm.
never my intention, is to turn it into a trilogy. Never. Really, my first intention was I wanted to write this story as a tribute to my mother. So that's what I was writing The Henna Artist for. And it took me 10 years to get it to publication. But during those 10 years, I had no other book I was writing. I had nothing else I was working on. I just wanted to make sure that my mother got credit for being this very strong woman who could not make her life different, but she made it different for me because it was important for her to leave that as a legacy. And so I just wanted to write this book for her. But over the course of 10 years, I became so familiar with these characters that they became like part of my family. And you probably know this as an author too, that after a certain point, these characters start to talk to you. They actually are directing the narrative. And so Malik, when I was finished with the Henna Artist and it went off to the printer, Malik kept saying, you have so many scenes about me that got cut out of the final copy of the book. And indeed, I had 140 pages that I had to cut out of the Henna Artist to make it tighter. And so, yes, it's true. So many of the scenes of him were cut out. So many of the scenes with Radha were cut out because most of the people who were working with me on the novel said, you've got to get rid of all the extraneous people. It's really about Lakshmi. You have to just focus on Lakshmi. So when Malik said, you've got all those scenes that were written about me that you never made it into the book, how about doing that? So I thought, okay, I couldn't ignore his voice. He just was so strong in my head. So then I started writing the second book, and that turned into The Secret Keeper of Jaipur. But get this, HarperCollins gave me a second book contract before the Henna Artist was even out in the bookstores, in the libraries, because they believed in the Henna Artist so much. And then when I gave them the first 20 pages of The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, they said, oh, here's another book contract. We don't want you to take it anywhere else. So then when I was finished with The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, they said, what else have you got? And I said, well, I don't really have anything else, but I do know that Radha at this point in time, when I want to follow her trajectory as an adult, is going to be in 1974 in Paris. And I know she has these two little girls, she has this French husband, and she wants to work in the perfume industry. So I want to get her there. And they said, okay, then, send us 20 pages. And I said, I don't have time to do 20 pages. I'm trying to promote 2 books. I'm going on book tours. I can't do it. So they said, well, just send us some kind of a summary, some synopsis of what you intend to do. I sent them 3 quick paragraphs while I was on the road, and they gave us a 3rd book contract right away. So that's how the trilogy came about. It had nothing to do with something I had, brainchild, intended to do.
Brilliant.
But that's beautiful because when I've just read the Henna, I'm only halfway through the Henna Artist because I was just reading it now recently, and I felt like you said, because it's completely focused on Lakshmi, the other voices are little muffled. They are there, but they're muffled. So I felt like, okay, can I know why Radha or Malik are doing what they're doing when this is happening? And I could only picture myself in the shoes of Lakshmi because that's how we've written the book.
Yeah.
So this is something that is very beautiful because most of our authors, when we talk to them, they say there's this pain when you let go of a few pages of your book during editing. I did that. I had to let go of, like Ms. Jayanti knows, this is one thing about me. I never let go of pages. I rewrote each. I didn't do edits. I did rewriting of each draft of my book. So I didn't let go of pages, but I let go of characters. There were certain characters in my book that were extra, that did not need the attention that I was giving them in the first draft. So I let go of those characters. But those characters are very beautiful and I still have a connection to them. So, and when we talk to other authors, when we have spoken for so long, for like 3 seasons, we've been here for 3 seasons, and every author says is we feel pain when we give away pages, right? So this is it's a beautiful way of turning those pages into an entire book in itself, just changing the narrative of it, just changing how it's spoken, right? Because if you had written it as a henna artist, you would still be speaking about them as Lakshmi. Whereas when you're talking about the perfumist, you're speaking as Radha. When you're talking about the secret keeper, it must be Malik, if I understand that's the right sequence.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah, I got a chance to do 3 voices.
Is Lakshmi coming also in the Gatekeeper and the Perfumist?
Must be first few.
Does she come?
pages.
Yeah.
Yes, because their life starts together and then only they go apart. So they must be together for some. I'm
They are
hoping
there.
as an author,
Okay.
that's what I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
I'm
they,
going
Lakshmi is the common thread, the common glue
oh,
for all
okay,
of them.
okay, okay.
So yeah,
I'll be
regardless,
I'll be
regardless of what's happening in their lives,
oh,
you know,
lovely.
Lakshmi usually comes in and sort of helps them with things that they need. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you something about an author transforming. We see authors transforming, like in Jhumpa Lahiri, she started loving Italian to the extent that she started writing in the language.
Yeah.
So I've seen as an Indian diaspora voice or an Indian voice or an Indian in the US voice. How is your voice seen as?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. Um, I do know that my readers are many and varied. It's amazing the range of people who read my books. So people who are listening to my voice are sometimes in their 20s. My youngest reader is 12, if you can believe it. And I have 16-year-old girls writing to me about reading these books.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So they range from about 20 to I have 95-year-old readers. And I think it's amazing that there's that big of a sort of diaspora of
Yes.
ages that are
Yeah.
reading this book,
Okay.
but also this larger field of people in 31 territories around the world who are reading my book. And so they often will write to me and say, oh, you know, this is just like the village I grew up in, even though they don't know anything about India.
Yeah,
I had a
yeah.
man from Czechoslovakia or Slovakia write to me, and he said, I have never been to India. I don't know any Indian people, but I read the Henna Artist in my language, and I feel like this is the village that I grew up in. This is it.
Oh,
Yeah,
sweet.
so I think that it's kind of a voice that resonates with many, many different people. And I don't think it is just a South Asian voice.
Oh,
It is a
lovely.
voice of somebody who is writing about people,
Uh-huh.
writing about women gaining their agency in life.
Okay.
And I think there's so many people around the world who can relate to that. So
Okay.
So, Auntie, to add to Ms. Jayanti, like to add to that, to what Ms. Alka is saying, because I'm reading the book, how it actually feels is it does, like Ms. Jayanti keeps saying this, that the author should never be visible through the book. She says you should not even think that there was someone who was writing it. It should feel so real that you forget that there was an author to this book. So that I can feel in her book, Alka's book. And basically what she does is, when she brings in Indian elements, she gives an explanation for anyone who's reading from outside, for them to know this is the culture. So this is what this is for. So they can understand. And most of the book, like right now, I'm like 3/4 of the book in. So like most of the book, it talks about the woman's internal feelings, which I think is common for all women around the world. I don't think it's localized to any particular country.
Yeah.
It's like
That is
basically
universal. Yeah.
abuse, and how you deal with abuse, and how you deal with separation, how you deal with like taking responsibility for the family, for your parents, for your
Yeah.
sister, everything.
Yeah.
So I think that is like a common thread that everyone could connect to, but to the parts where only Indians can grasp it, I think she has given ample information as to like, this is why Indians are doing this. This is why Jaipur is like this. This is why the city was like this. So I think
Oh,
she has given those pointers ahead.
I'm
okay.
gonna take you on all of my book tours now because you're a great spokesperson for me.
Daniel is, I tell you, she is a brilliant reader. One of the brilliant readers I have come across in my life. And the reader in her connected us. She read my first manuscript, and that's how we got to know each other. So I'm going to ask another question. How important do you think the background of the author to her fiction, be it historical or whatever? Do you believe at least a part of the fiction should come from the lived experience, or how much of lived experience do you think is required?
You know, it's interesting. I think that when you are writing about another culture, but you're writing it for English speakers, I
Yeah.
think the lived experience is extremely important. I think you do have to have sort of an innate knowledge of how people live and breathe and eat and, you know, interact with one another in that culture. I think it's not so important. Maybe, let's say, if you are English speaker writing to English speakers, then there doesn't, like I could be writing during the 1800s, Jane Austen's
Yes.
time, and I
Yes.
don't necessarily have to explain all that to
Yeah.
everybody, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm writing about India and I'm writing it for a Western publisher,
Mhm.
then I think that has to have a real lived experience. And as you were saying, it has to be understandable to everyone. The way that you're going to explain it, it has to be a natural part of the narrative. You can't
Yes.
just, download, 3 paragraphs of history or 3 paragraphs of a cultural reference. You just have to kind of weave it in
Yes.
this way and that way.
Yeah.
And I think, I had I did 30 versions of the Henna
Oh.
Artist.
Oh.
The one that finally went to press was 30 versions. And the reason for that is that with every layer, with every version, I would layer on something else, or I would take away things. And so making it tighter and tighter and tighter, so that even somebody who has never been to India would understand all these little
Oh, okay.
references.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Danya wrote
just-
seven drafts, and I used to think she's done the most number of drafts for a debut
and I'm
novel.
happy to
But
hear
here-
someone say 30
here
drafts.
Alka has exceeded even 4 times, more than 4 times.
Yes.
Interesting.
Oh my
right?
gosh, Danya. So did you feel after 7 that you were completely done?
No,
No,
no one will
I still
feel
don't
like
feel I'm
that.
done. I still don't feel, when I read my book, I'm like, I could have done this better, done that better. So I stopped because there was lack of time. Like Miss Jayanti knows this well, because my 7th draft I wrote after the publisher said, okay, your manuscript is due now. Like they gave me a time, so like we are giving you 3 months, you have to finish the manuscript by then. Those 3 months were my 7th draft. So it was a final draft. I just had to give it up because there was no time.
Wow.
So I just gave it up. I still am not, I still feel that there are parts of it where I should have written better, or because it's my first book and I don't come from a literature background. I come from a science background, and I have the style of bringing in science into everything. So
Yeah.
there will be parts of science, and there are parts which I'm like, oh, I could have written about this. Oh, I could have done this, all that. I still feel so. I don't read my book. I didn't read my book after it was published. There are, when people, like when I do interviews, or like when I was like the award things and all that, like the competitions that I was participating in, and people will say, do you remember this page? And I would be like, no, can you tell me what's on that page? I don't really remember.
We all, of course, we don't remember the page
Yeah.
wise, chapter wise. Yeah. Interesting.
But I feel, okay, this may be very specific to the Henna Artist, because the other books I've not read, but I would like to understand, like there are parts where you've brought in elements which are not which talk about the diversity in India, which is beautiful, which you speak about these pleasure women from Iraq and like Iran and Isfahan basically. So like from there, and you get to understand, okay, so these are parts of our not the colonial history, but our
Mughal.
history before that, Mughal. Yeah, exactly. So the Mughal and the archaical history of India. It's not the colonial part, but it's remnants of that earlier parts. So for that, I mean, did you have to do research about periods? Was your research based on like periods of Indian like history, or did you do research like a string, like you took a part and you just went backward to where it started? Is that how you went through the research? How was your research like for this?
Well, I did 3 things in my research, and I think the research led to very specific things that then I did a deep dive in. So what I do is I talk to a lot of people. Now, I am lucky in that my father is still alive. He is 93, and he is very much with us in terms of his mind and his body. And,
He was the one who introduced you to me, right? Remember?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And my dad, is just, I think he's going to outlive all of us. But he is very sharp. He has a great memory. And so he remembers what it was like pre-independence, post-independence.
So
He was
sweet.
born in
Amazing.
1933. Yeah. So, so I interviewed him a lot. I would ask him lots of questions about what life was like and what people ate and how they dressed. And, and then another part of my research is I watch a lot of movies. And as we all know, Bollywood and various parts of India, they have made movies, so many movies that I could find so many of them from the 1950s and 60s I could watch as a reference. So that's another thing that I do. And then a third thing I do is I read fiction and nonfiction books of that era. So fiction books, I'll read I don't know if you guys have ever read Kamla Markandaya, Nectar in a Sieve. I read Life in a Haveli. I
Road
read
to Pakistan.
No, I didn't read that one, but I'm sure that there are so many more
That's
that
only
I
partition and the riots and massacre. Yeah.
yeah. But mainly I was interested in reading novels that were just talking about life, family life. And I think Tagore is a great one to read about family life, even though he was writing about it in the 1930s.
Bengali, yeah.
Yes.
It still applies in the 50s and 60s.
Yes.
So that is the third part of my research, third leg of my research. So when I then started realizing that there were these courtesans who were a big part of the Mughal Empire, when I was reading one of my books, I thought these women are fascinating. Let me do a deep dive into them. And so that became a big part of the Henna Artist, where Lakshmi found refuge, because I realized that courtesans would often take in women who were being abused in their families or had nowhere else to go, had been thrown out of the family for some reason.
They played the vital role in taking forward the Kathak form of dance, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so that was another thing that I did a deep dive in. So in the very end of the Henna Artist, I'm sorry to spoil it for you, Danya, but Lakshmi is going to dance a Kathak story in her own house. So these were things that I was personally interested in researching, and I thought, well, why not? How can I incorporate them into the novel? And so that's how they made their way into the novel. Another thing, of course, was the whole art of henna. I didn't know where the henna paste came from. So then I did a deep dive into that, and I learned that the henna plant in Rajasthan grows. It grows so well because it's hot and arid, and that's the kind of climate it needs. And so then how do you make it a paste? Well, you grind up the leaves really fine, and then you start adding all these essential oils to it. And I read about all of that, and I thought, well, this is fabulous. People don't even know this. I need to write this down. So that's how Lakshmi came to be a henna artist. It was just little by little, all these little details came into play. I'll show you this thing that my husband brought home for me one day. He is not Indian, so, this is all very interesting to him. But he brought this home one day. It's called Hindu Altars, and it is a pop-up book about the different gods and goddesses. And I think there's 4 of these in here. So here is Lakshmi and Vishnu
Shiva.
And Saraswati,
Durga.
and then finally Ganesh. But then look on the sides here, there are these henna hands.
So beautiful.
So when I saw this, I said, oh, then she's got to be a henna artist. So that's kind of how that came along. And then, of course, I had to research henna and try to figure out how does Mandy.
As if the universe was leading you to the main character and the title and things.
Yeah. It's amazing how many.
This is just my. Yeah, please go on.
I was just going to say, it's amazing how many points of intersection you get. And then you start, your mind just starts going and you go, oh, she could do this at this point. Oh, and then the courtesans will come into play here. Oh, and then the Kathak dance. I've always been so fascinated by Kathak dancing. I thought, I've got to figure out some way to make that happen.
Danya also likes Kathak.
Yeah, I love Kathak as well. So one more thing that I wanted to ask you is that while writing, did you feel because you are you're not settled in India and you have grown up in the US a lot, and I understand that though the heritage is here, a person who's living in India has a very different perspective of India than a person who's outside of India. So did you feel that maybe your Indian voice was too Americanized?
You know,
Did you ever feel that when you were writing?
no, I didn't feel that way. And it's interesting because since I'm an immigrant to this country, I learned a long time ago how to watch the differences between people. Um, so I think when I came here, I was very shy. I was shy in India as well, but I became even more shy when I got here because everybody looked different. And, you know, it wasn't like the USA of today where you have large enclaves of Indians living in different parts of the country. When my father came here in 1965 and then sent for all of us in 1966, there only 100 Indians were allowed that year in this country, only 100. And it was only because my father was getting a doctorate in civil engineering. They only wanted people who were getting higher education degrees here. So, so we were completely adrift in this land, in the sea of Americans. We didn't know any other Indians at all. And so I just started watching people. I was just observing people. And I listened to the spaces in between what they say and don't say, and how they perceived us as being other people, just sort of watching how that took place. And I think I became a really keen observer of how the differences in people play out. So when it came to writing my stories, I just felt like I'm really not all American and I'm not all Indian, but what I can do is be objective about writing about Indians. See, because I'm not there all the time, and I'm objective about how Americans perceive Indians currently and how they need to perceive them differently. So I wanted to have them perceive Indians the way life is lived in India and not just their idea of what Indians are. Their idea right now is, oh, there's these big weddings. And you know,
Bollywood.
Yeah. And women wear, you know, bindis on their foreheads and they wear saris. You know, they only
Big
know
dangly earrings.
Yes, they only know certain things about us.
I
And
can
so,
understand what you mean because I'm a 35 years of, I've been living in Singapore. So I'm an immigrant also in that sense, first generation immigrant. So I know what you mean, how we see things, where our interest lies in the differences. In the most positive way, we look at the differences between the different races and different kinds of cultures, right? I can understand that very well. So you were 5 years, 9 years when you came to the US.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's fascinating because I came to Singapore when I was in my early 20s after marriage. So for me to come to another country at that age is different from a 9-year-old. So how did that? I mean, I'm sure it took lots of lot more effort to know about India than I could have researched, right? So your father seemed to have helped you. The same question as Dhanya normally asks: how much of research was really needed?
Oh, a lot of research was needed. Oh, tons and tons. One of my biggest concerns was that Indians would say, you don't have a right to write about us because you've lived in America for most of your life. Or that they might say, well, you got this totally wrong. You don't understand our culture at all. So it was very important for me to make sure that all that research would pay
Yeah,
off at some point.
Singaporeans tell that. Yes.
So the question was, you know, how important was the research and extensive. So I really had to make sure that it wasn't something that was going to come back and bite me on the butt, you know? So, and then of course, you know, every time I write something, I would send it to my dad and I would say, Dad, would you read this and see if I got any of it wrong?
Oh.
Yeah, he was my personal superpower.
First reader.
My first reader. And then
Lovely.
Yeah, and then I would also have a couple of other Indian people read it just to make sure.
Good.
I have so many recipes in the books, and my mother is no longer alive, so I
Okay.
had to remember how she cooked these things. And
Okay.
she wasn't anybody who read the recipe, right? She just said,
Yeah.
thoda this and thoda that, and
Andaz se dalte.
right.
Um,
So I had to vet the recipes with several people and just make sure that they were coming out right. So I think I had a lot of really good people that I could rely on, but people I really needed to, check my work. So I think, the other thing is that one of the things I found out is that there are a lot of young South Asians who do not know our history. They do not know India's history. They do not know independence and post-independence, what those really crucial years were doing and how they were rebuilding the country. Now, my dad was one of those people who was helping rebuild the country. So it was easy for me to get that kind of information. He was a young engineer. He was building roads and dams and bridges, all the things that we needed once the British left the country in tatters, right? The British left. They were supposed to be here for a whole year for the transition. They left after a couple of months. They just left a mess. And so, the government and ministers and everybody, had to sort of pick up, and the engineers really did the hard lifting. So, in order to get all of that history, I really had to actually talk to people. It's very hard. I don't know if you found this either, Danya, but it's very hard to find like really concrete Indian history about what was happening during that time that is not just politics. It's not just who was managing the Indian Congress and who wasn't, and just like ordinary people trying to manage this transition.
Resonate so well
So,
with Danya.
actually, for me, I had this advantage that I am preparing for public services exams in India, and history is a huge part of my syllabus. So, I had to read like vast extenses of history, like independence, pre-independence, the history of the kings, the monarchical history. So much of history I had in store. That was what pushed me to write about history in the first place, actually.
Oh.
Because I used to enjoy reading that, and I used to find like what I did was there were syllabus recommended books as to like proper note-taking type of books, and there were books which the same authors would write just to enlarge our knowledge from not just the stream, just to have like other stuff added into it, like who were the wives and what were the wives doing at home, how were the palaces and all that type of books I used to read parallelly, because I enjoyed this, and because I felt like the wars, this I tell people, like the wars that the kings fought, they started at home. Like, there was a reason for them at home to fight the wars they fought. Okay, they would have seen, like, there was a personal reason for those wars, and the personal reasons was never mentioned in history. And when I read these books, I understood, oh, now I understand why this man had to fight with that man. I understand this. So, okay, so you want to marry his daughter, then of course you have to fight with him, right? So we understand that part of history better when we read such books. And mine is a little different because I wrote the life of a soldier during and after partition. So for me, my main research was on what type of equipments they were using at that time as an army, and like what type of arms and ammunitions were necessary, what type of arms and ammunitions India could afford, and how much of it was given to Pakistan. All that I had to do research, like as to how did these get divided, and how the line was drawn, how the Radcliffe line was drawn, how important that line was, and how insignificantly it was made to be. So these were my main areas of research. I didn't have to do research on the actual history because that was there from my syllabus for me.
Yeah.
So this part I did not struggle. This other part I struggled, and Auntie would know it better. I struggled while I wrote a romance. I was very happy writing war. There are a few chapters in my book which are romance. I struggled so much. She used to push me like, Danya, give some emotion. I would be like, no, I'm not feeling that emotion.
But she could write well, both war and love. And coming back to what initially Danya said about Henna, because she's reading, I have not read I'm yet to read. She said you are giving certain information that the readers might not know, and it would help them read the novel. I understand. Can you please elaborate on that, how you actually did it there? Of course, she would know because she's reading, but from your perspective as an author, what kind of a tool or tools you used? Can we get that, please? So that our aspiring authors can get help, some kind of inspiration, maybe.
As I was saying with my research, I think that if you're going to write historical fiction, you
Mhm.
really should watch some of the movies that were happening during that time period, and read the books that were being written around that time period. So I think those are very big tools that I had. One interesting little piece that I got from my mother is that she said that before we left for India, Dad was already here, and the three of us were, 7, 8, 9, whatever ages we were. And my mom was invited to the palace to have tea with Maharani Gayatri Devi. And because all of the women who were wives going abroad were invited for tea. And my mother told me, how beautiful she was, and that the Maharani asked her, where are you going? And Mom said, America. And she said, North or South? And my mother said, North America. And my mother said she was so glad she knew the difference when when asked. But she also told me, things like you could see the Maharani driving in her Bentley all around town. The royals were very accessible. They're not like the Queen of England walking around, with these bodyguards all the time. And so that then led me to do a deep dive on the Maharani Gayatri Devi. And I read this whole book called A Princess Remembers, and it was her memoir. It was a fascinating memoir about life in the palace and what it was like for her to be the third Maharani of the Maharaja of Jaipur. So these are the kind of tools that I used. An interview will fascinate, some part of it will fascinate you, and then you go to a deep dive into that. And so that's kind of what I do. I have notebooks just filled with all these notes that I took from my research. But here's the thing. You can take a notebook and fill it with things. But the thing is, you will only probably use about 5 little facts out of that notebook. You're really doing the research for you so that all the information is inside you, it's absorbed, and then little bits of it will come out as you're writing, and you'll go, oh yeah, that little thing, I remember that, let me look it up, and I'm going to include that little piece, whether it's a snuff brand that somebody used to snuff back then, or whether it's the type of Bentley that the Maharani was driving. So these are the kinds of little things that crop up. And my tools are really the research I do, and then the research books that I rely on when I start writing.
Okay, so I think I'll rephrase the question because this like Ms. Jayanti's direction was somewhere else. I'll just again rephrase this question for you to understand what she meant. So what she is trying to ask is that when I said you bring parts of the Indian culture and you explain it to them, Auntie, for you, Ms. Jayanti, to understand, she's not saying, she wants to know how you show without telling it. What was your tool that you used to show that part? Because Ms. Jayanti, she also has written one historical fiction, and she brings in the times of the kings, and she uses basically like an imaginary email between someone in the present who was writing to a king, because it's in her imagination that she can contact him still.
Yeah.
So in my book, I have used letters basically to bring in such, some parts of history, like I could not just write in this infantry, this person was doing this. So I would write a letter where it is addressed to, okay, this person to this infantry, to this part of India, so that the people will know, okay, this is where he's stationed. Because I didn't want to write exclusively, like just explicitly that, okay, this man was stationed in this regiment in this infantry. I didn't want that. So I had to write a letter and had to address it to that infantry. And I had to show that, how I would show that the infantry was in a place where it was inaccessible is for the time it took for the letter to reach him. So that way she's asking, what tools have you used literally for you to express those Indian cultural elements?
I love novels that use letters. So I do have letters going back and forth from various people. It's not a true novel in of letters in that sense, but every now and then I do use that. I think that my biggest toolkit is sensory. So I use, instead of saying that somebody was on a busy street, I will show how busy it is by saying, it's the first, part of the Henna Artist. It's the first paragraph of the Henna Artist that I can read for you. But I want to have people experience what the smells are in this environment that the characters are in, what they are hearing, what they are feeling, what they are touching. These are all really, I think, tools that are often not used by authors. The laziest sense that we can use is our sight, right? So we can say he goes from here to there. But what is in between? What is he smelling? Does he see the skunk cross the road? And has he gone close enough to it that it's, exploded with scent? So these are the kind of tools I use in order to not just say, but show. I really want to show it.
I just love your book so much, so I'm going to add more points to what you were
Sure.
saying about your book. So I would like to explain what I felt when she was showing and not saying. She always left a hook. Okay, for us to keep thinking. Okay, we would keep wondering in the next few pages as to why was this part smelling like this? Why? What was that hard feeling in this person? Like, if let's say this Lakshmi lady is giving off a sachet. This was what I was curious. She was always giving out some sachet to a man, and I was like, what is that sachet about? Why is she giving it out to people, and why is she getting money for it? Because she's an henna artist. Why? What package was she giving? And what is this tea that she's talking about? And then when that hook was released, you understand, it would all make sense. So she was bringing elements of Indian culture in hooks. I feel, yes, she was bringing it through sensory, but there was always a hook in that sensory. It was not immediately revealed at all.
That's
never immediately revealed.
Right.
That can hold the reader in place. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll just read you a little bit. So this is the prologue of the Henna Artist.
Sure.
Her feet step lightly on the hard earth, callous soles insensible to the tiny pebbles and caked mud along the riverbank. On her head, she balances a mutki, the same earthenware jug she uses to carry water from the well every day. But today, instead of water, the girl is carrying everything she owns, a second petticoat and blouse, her mother's wedding sari, the tales of Krishna her father used to read to her, the pages fabric soft from years of handling, and the letter that arrived from Jaipur earlier this morning. When she hears the voices of the village women in the distance, the girl hesitates. The gossip eaters are chatting, telling stories, laughing as they wash their saris, petticoats, and dhotis. But when they spot her, she knows that they will stare or spit on the ground, imploring God to protect them from the bad luck girl. She reminds herself of the letter, safe inside the mutki, and thinks, let them, it will be the last time.
Oh, she's leaving the place.
So you have a sense of where she is. You know that there is something.
Why are they saying bad luck? Is she a widow?
No. We don't want to tell you. You have to read it, Auntie.
So I know what you mean, Danya. Now she's leaving hooks. Yeah, I know.
Yes, she's leaving beautiful hooks as to because
and I think that's very fascinating. Tool to keep the readers engaged in place. Yeah,
no,
nice.
she is using a lot of sensory emotions, like sensory.
That of course every one of us do.
Yeah, like pebbles, because pebbles are going to be on the river banks. There's going to be a river aside, like on the side pebbles, and it's hot, means it's in the summer. It's somewhere around where it's sweaty, and if she's carrying a matki, which means she's a girl who's above an age where she can do household chores. So these are all beautifully brought in. But when she says when she brings in this bad luck girl, you are thinking all those possibilities. Why is she so that
bad luck?
he's there for a long time. It's not there. It's not revealed in the exact next chapter as well. It takes like 2, 3 chapters for her to, and she keeps adding on to that hook, and it is very beautiful. It's very beautiful. And and see now in this first prologue, she has given like a touch, feel, sensory emotion to this girl's walk. In the next chapters, she says like when she looks at another man, she feels a smell of him, and all. So she brings in the next sensory. So there are sensory elements added to the hook until the hook is revealed. So that is
lovely.
very beautifully
Amazing.
done.
Amazing. Amazing.
Well, you know, and you both know as writers that you can't tell everybody everything right off the bat, right? So it's just like when you are told a story.
Lovely,
It's just
lovely,
like
Alka. I
it's
must
just
read.
like a tale of
I will.
Krishna, right? When you hear the tales of Krishna, you don't know the full story right away, but you know that he's trying to entice this milkmaid, you know, into his lair, and you know, it's fascinating for us readers to be carried along. We don't want to know the full story. We like to be enticed into it.
Lovely, lovely. I'm going to read. I will borrow. I think
Please,
our library has your book.
please
Henna
read.
Artist.
I am enjoying it, and
I will borrow.
And so you know, here's another thing is because I never knew that this might turn into a trilogy, I had all of those research books, right? So I found out all about those courtesans for the henna artist. Well, I brought them back for the Perfumist of Paris because Radha has to come from Paris to Agra, where the courtesans who took Lakshmi in that, so they are the ones that know about scent, and they're going to help Radha introduce India to France. There is, in each one of my books, it's also very important for me that readers see another part of India, another contribution that India has made that has not been recognized by the world. How many people think, oh, Paris is the perfume capital of the world? Where would Paris be without the cloves and the cinnamon and the tuberose and the jasmine, all of the cardamom and all of those scents that came from the Indian subcontinent? Very few people know that those fragrance companies in Europe still rely on India for all of those essential oils.
That's right.
Why does India not get recognized? I feel sometimes that I am on a one-woman mission to provide PR for India.
All 3 of us are.
Excited. Lovely.
So, Akka, we understand that your second book and third book were very welcomed by when. So, can you tell us about your first book's pitch to them, and how long it took for you to find editors, and how did you go through the editing process before you pitched into them?
Yeah. Okay, so I got very lucky in the sense that I had actually stopped working on the book right after my MFA program was over. That in the Masters of Fine Arts program, that's when I wrote The Henna Artist. But my mother died shortly thereafter, and I wrote the book for her. Lakshmi is my mother. And this is the alternate life that I wish my mother could have led, much more independent, much more, you know, open to her abilities. And so when my mother died, I stopped writing. But one of my instructors from the program, Anita, she said, hey, you know, where is that book? Why aren't you writing it? And I told her what happened to Mom. And she said, well, you've got to write it because we in the program, we think that you have the best shot at getting this thing published. I said, well, you know, will you work with me on it? She said, yes. So then she and I worked on it for the next year and a half. And she sent it off to her agent. Now, Anita is from Iran, and she wrote this lovely historical fiction about a young rug weaver in Iran in the 17th century.
Lovely.
So she knew that if her agent liked her book, she would probably like my book. And yes, the next thing I know, I get a call from her agent in New York, and she says, Alka, I love this book. I love this character. So let's work on it. And I thought I was going to get published immediately, but no, she said, you have so much work to do to make this a novel that a publisher wants to buy. I was shocked because I thought the only way you got an agent is because they loved the book that you had submitted, like just lock, stock, and barrel. No, it doesn't turn out like that. So then I said, well, what do you want me to do, Emma? And she said, I want you to cut out this chapter. I want you to think about this character's development. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. So 3 years go by while I'm working with my agent on this book. And every now and then, I'm sending her back another version. And then finally, I said, Emma, I have been working on this novel now for 6 or 7 years. I don't understand. Why aren't you sending it off to somebody? She said, well, you're a debut author. You have no pedigree anywhere. You have never published anything, not a short story, not a poem, anything. And so really, the only way that we're going to get a publisher hooked is if they love the book and they think it's going to be a bestseller. So I said, all right, then what do I do now? And she said, well, I have taken you as far as I can take you, but now you need a developmental editor, and those people can take you to the finish line. You have to hire these people. They charge by the word. Sometimes they charge by the project, but I hired 2 of them. The first one, gave me 8 pages of things that she thought I should do differently. She said, love the book, but here are things you should do differently. And I thought, I don't want to do anything differently. So I really want to, I really want to have an editor who tells me I'm perfect. So then I hired this next editor, and she sent me back 3 times as many pages of things that she thought I should do differently. And at that point, and I think a lot of us go through this as authors, we just go, I give up. I've done everything that I was supposed to do. I think I've written the best book. I give up. Nobody wants this book. Okay, fine. And then it was a year later that and Anita, I think, forgot about me. Excuse me, my agent, Emma, I think she just forgot about me. And so she wasn't like asking me for the novel or anything like that. But a year later, I was in my office looking through my desk, and I saw this novel. And I just thought, what is wrong with this novel? Why does nobody want to publish this? Maybe I'll read those comments again by those editors. And I read them again, and they totally made sense. And I think sometimes you just need to take time away from this thing that has been in our mind for so long. We just have to step away. And for me, I had to step away for a year for that to happen. So then I started making those changes. It took me another year because I was still working full time. So it took me another year. And then I sent the novel back to Emma, and I just said, Emma, it's been 9 years now. 9 years. This is my 25th draft I'm sending you. I don't want to wait another year for you to send this off. Please, please, please. And so she did. And so then I got Kathy, my new editor at HarperCollins. She came with a contract. In fact, she was the acquiring editor. So she had been to India. She loves India. She understood the book completely. She got it. And so then she worked with me for the next year on making major changes to the book. And one of them was, most of them were minor, but the one major change was to the character of Hari. And you'll know this, Danya, Lakshmi's husband, the estranged husband. And she said, Alka, his character is all bad. And I said, I know, I hate him because he beats up on Lakshmi, and I don't like that. And she said, it's obvious that you hate him. And so as an author, you cannot hate any of your characters. Your reader should not know that you hate them. Your reader should be able to decide for themselves. And what that means is that every character should have good, bad, ugly, smart, bad. I mean, just anything. It has to be a realistic person. It has to be a whole person. So can you make Hari a whole person instead of just all of us hating him? So that was a major change I had to go through, and that actually changed my entire ending of the book.
I think this ability to antagonize a character came from the Bollywood movies that you're watching, because they make the villain the villain. But
this change, the major change that you're talking about, would have changed the whole tonality of the novel.
Yes.
The whole, right? The texture of the
Actually,
voice.
I was about to ask you how you brought in characters without antagonizing anyone, and you just answered that on your own.
Lovely. So now we are almost for wrapping, right, Danya?
Yeah. So we have this segment in our session called the World of W's. World of W's is nothing but W questions like what, when, where, how, and all that. So if someone could not sit through the entire session, they could just scroll down here and look hear it and understand what we have been speaking for so long.
And I'll ask the first question. When is your
Yes.
fourth book due?
It is coming out. It will be released in early 2025, and it is called The Many Loves of Mira Novak, because it is not part of this trilogy.
Okay, good.
But it
good.
is taking place in India. It is a young Anglo-Indian girl. She is a nurse,
Okay.
and she is taking care of a painter, very much like Amrita Sher-Gill.
Oh,
And
you're sharing. You're too generous, Alka. You're too generous. And no one shares so much about the forthcoming book. They just step away. It might come this year, next year, but you're so generous, so sweet. Thank you. It's very nice.
So yeah, so she's taking care of someone, a painter, and then
yeah, and Amrita Sher-Gill is a real treasure from India that deserves also a spotlight, and a lot of people have forgotten about her. But I went to New Delhi in 2019 to the National Gallery, and I wanted to see her paintings in close up. And after I did, I thought, oh, I really do want to write about her. I think she's going to be fascinating, and she was fascinating. She was very, how do I put it? Very much of an iconoclast. She was very loose with her morals and just, a woman so far ahead of her time. She died in 1941. She was only 28 years old. So so I've set the novel in 1939, and the nurse is taking care of this very famous painter, also an iconoclast. And the painter dies a mysterious death, and the nurse spends the rest of the novel trying to figure out what might have happened. So she has to go visit the many loves of this painter, and those are in Prague, they're in Paris, and they're in Florence, and they're in London.
Oh, so you are taking the
we'll travel there as well.
We are all getting to travel to these places. Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome.
I will wait for this. Very excited.
You have to finish this trilogy before
Of course.
You have to.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. So, Alka, we would like to know where our listeners could find all your work, your books, and the other works that you have done, please.
So my books are everywhere where books are sold. Of course, they're on Amazon. You can find them in Amazon India as well. They are sold in Barnes and Nobles everywhere here in the West. In Canada, they're sold in all the Indigo stores, which are the Barnes and Noble of Canada. And you can find out more about me, of course, at alkajoshi.com. Or on Instagram, where I love to hang out. I love Instagram. And that is at the Alka Joshi, because I realized there was another Alka Joshi who was a bus driver, and I didn't want to be confused. What is this bus driver doing writing stories?
You're going to write about bus driver next, maybe fifth book.
Yeah. And also I have to tell you that one of the most pleasurable ways of reading these books is listening to them. And my narrator, Sneha Mathan, is just an amazing narrator. And if you get a chance to just listen because you're, on the road a lot, or if you are...
I will then think about audiobooks. Okay, I will.
Oh, she is just amazing. She gets Lakshmi's voice completely.
Okay, Alka, when know your novel is done? I mean, you so much of research, so many redrafts, right? So when do you actually know, oh, I've come to the place? Yes, it's done. How do you know?
I can't even tell you that, but I do know I have reached this point, and there's been a climax. Then there's a denouement, right? That goes a little bit below. And then I just know I'm done. I just know.
Basically, cooking. Yeah, it's similar to cooking, I think. We all know it's done. Remove it. Yeah.
That's a really good analogy.
I have never. I've not reached the literary maturity yet.
Cooking characters, building mixing them in right proportions and things. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think I have not reached the literary maturity that you guys have to know when it's done. I don't know. I still don't know when it's done.
You will know then. Yeah, it's only. I mean, you will know in your next one. Just watch.
Okay, so how was the process of translation? Because your books have been translated in 29 languages, and I'm sure that it was very, what part did you play in those translations? And
No part at all, actually. So what happens is with, there are 5 major publishers in the West. It's Hachette, Simon and Schuster, Penguin Random House, Macmillan, and HarperCollins. And so these guys, when you sell your novel to them, you can sell them your world rights. I sold them my world rights. And so what they do is they are now approached by other countries to say, hey, we'd like to translate this and publish it in France, in Russia, in Brazil. And so they're the ones responsible for selling it. And then the publisher from the foreign country is responsible for the translation. So I don't actually have anything to do with that. But I'll tell you this. Okay, I have to tell you this because this is so funny. I was zooming in with a book club in Mumbai. And the organizer, he said, Alka, how many Indian languages has your book been translated into? I said, as far as I know, Harper India only put it out in English.
Hindi.
He said,
Oh, he's
well,
in
you can.
English.
He said, you can walk in the streets of Mumbai, and at the intersections, you can pick up your book in Tamil and Telugu and Hindi. And I said, really? So these are all pirated copies. So I'm going to get a hold of him and say, can you send me those books?
I'd be more than happy to find them for you. I'll also search for them for you.
I would love it, Danya. I would love it. And because they're pirated, I doubt if you'll find them, online. I don't know, maybe you will, but
No, we have like the malls that have bookstores. I can just check.
Put aside the unethical part of it. Isn't this flattery, Alka?
I love it.
Is this flattery? I mean, yeah, I know it's unethical, but at the same time, your book is going into the languages that you didn't even know they went, the went for
but
officially 29 languages. Unofficially, we don't know how many languages.
Exactly. Oh, good way. Oh, that's good. I'm going to tell people that officially 29.
Oh, I think Alka would hire me as her PR agent now because I'm giving you more things.
And let's go, Alka, let's go to the Netflix thing. So the adaptation. Do you still have any say in the script? Are you involved when they are doing it?
I am involved in a very limited capacity. So every now and then they need information like who were Lakshmi's parents? What were their names? Where did they live? What kind of place did they live in Lucknow before they were sent to this little village in Ajar? So these are the kinds of things they need information that only I would have. So that's when they get on the phone with me or on a Zoom call and they go, okay, can you answer some questions for us? Other than that, I don't have any direct link to the scripts that they're writing, and I have no connection to Netflix at all. So I did get a nice happy birthday. I did get a nice happy birthday message from my producers.
Alka, who is doing the role of Lakshmi?
That is going to be Frida Pinto.
Frida? Okay. Frida Pinto, the girl who comes in the Slumdog Millionaire, no, auntie? The girl who comes in Slumdog Millionaire, the heroine. Her. I think PC would have been a better.
Who?
Priyanka Chopra would have been a better pick.
Priyanka Chopra, no. I think
no, she would
Pariniti Chopra would have been.
No. This role, that's how the role is. Pariniti may be the sister, maybe Radha, but Lakshmi, I think PC would have been a better pick. I don't know. It's just the Indian English speaking.
Maybe she's too costly or something. Anyways. Nice.
So we would like to know your this is our parting question. We usually ask this to all authors. So we would like to know what you would like for aspiring authors who are listening to this episode to know what is your advice for them, and if you could share with us how you felt through this session and how your feedback about this.
Well, this has been really delightful. I love the fact that this is a conversation that is not just an interview, but you're actually also relating your ideas to me, because I think it's always fun to talk to a bunch of writers about, how do they process all this information. I think that my advice to writers would be, first of all, if you think you can't do it, you actually can. It just might take you a little bit longer. And when you think you've done, 3 drafts, 4 drafts, and you think you're done, you're not done yet. There is so much more that you could probably do. So just keep reading. Read out loud what you have written. And you catch so much stuff when you read out loud. Like as you're reading it, you go, oh, you know what? I don't need that extra sentence here. I've already said everything that I needed to say. And I think cut, cut, cut. So they always say that when you write a scene, get into the scene in the middle. So start the scene from the middle of where everybody is talking and leave before the end. And that makes a really tight scene.
The hook also is great. Right? Yeah. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alka.
Lovely having you, Alka. This is one of the best in the 3 seasons, I think, both for us as well as for the those who are going to watch. This is one of the best episodes of our LOL. Thank you for being with us, and let's keep in touch. We don't have to.
Yes.
Yeah, always.
Thank you.
Stop the recording. Can you please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your patience. I do hope that your listeners will follow me on social media, because that's where they find out where I'm going to be.
Yes.
And whether there will be, some kind of a presentation on Zoom or in a public place that they could be a part of.
Yeah.
Yes.
We would also, when we put in our details in our social media, we will send them I will add a link to your website and stuff so that they can keep in touch.
Can I tell you one more thing before you
Bye.
go?
Do you want to stop the recording so that we can talk?
Oh, no, you don't have to stop the recording. So last year I had the coolest thing happen. I didn't even know it was going to happen. I didn't even know what was happening, but I got word that Forbes wanted to talk to me. And it turned out that Forbes has these lists, 30 under 30. So 30 fabulous people who are under 30 years age who are doing fabulous things. They decided finally to start a list called 50 over 50, women over 50 who were doing things that really needed to be recognized.
Okay.
And so I get this letter and it says, you are one of the 50 over 50 that we have selected out of 10,000 names in America, 10,000 names.
Lovely.
And I was like, I am just a writer. I don't know how I got on this list. But then we were all invited to Forbes in New York City at their headquarters on Fifth Avenue. And I got to meet all these amazing women. Patti LaBelle, who is a big singer, is one of the 50 over 50. Jamie Lee Curtis, the actress, was one of the 50 over 50. Huma Abedin, who is half Pakistani, half Indian. She is the one who, when she got up to, she's the co-chair of the organization. So when she got up to, welcome everybody, and there were only those of us who were in the membership were allowed. It wasn't like we had friends and family who could come. It was a very small set. Okay. And she said, I welcome everybody. This is really a great thing to be able to talk to all of you. And she said, we have amazing women here like Alka Joshi, who has written these books that are internationally famous. And she didn't mention anybody else. And I was like, oh my God, there were women there who run companies. There were women there who run medical institutions. All I did was write a couple of books.